Welcome, this is the first of a series of 5 little videos that are going to look through various topics, starting with filtering and sanitizing user inputs, looking at how you build a search and details page, then into CRUDing, so editing of records, adding of records and deleting of records. And this is to support a lab which is on Blackboard. It is the PHP MySQL Part 2 zip, building a content management system. So the series of 5 videos are going to be supported by the PDF that's in the lab files on Blackboard, so PHP MySQL building a CMS with PHP data object PDO. And first thing we need to do is make sure that you've got your connection file set up. So we'll be starting with this index page here, and what we want to do is load in our connection file. This is something that you'll have seen from other labs. So I've got a connection file here. This is where you need to put in your database name, your username and your password. These are your PHP myadmin username credentials, and that's the name of the database, not the table. So that will, for students, that's your student underscore DB1, for example. So I'm going to include that in. So we can say include, and then includes com.inc.php, because it is located in that includes folder. I'm in this file here, and I want to load that one. So that loads the connection file, and let's just test that. So you need to have moved these files to the home pages server. So if you're working on the university machine, it just means saving the public HTML. If you're doing this outside of SHU, you'll need a server to support this. Right, so when I try this, you'll see that I'm getting an error. It's saying something about some function of save string. Now let me explain what's going on here. I want to get into talking about sanitizing and validating user inputs. So in the file, in the code I've already given you, there is a reference to a function here called save string. Now this is a function name that I've created myself, and I've put it into this functions include here. There's a function here called save string. So I do need to load that in. What I'm going to talk about is what these are actually doing. So to get things working now, let's load that include in. So it's in the same includes folder. So I can load in functions. Incidentally, the reason I saw that error message is because on the homepage server where this is being done, error handling is switched on. If you're doing this on the server where you don't see those error messages, you can use this command here to enable the display of error messages. On a production machine, you'd want that to be switched off, which you would do like so. On this server that I'm using, it's switched on by default, so I'll comment that out. I don't need it for my purposes here. Right, so now I've got that included into the functions in there as well. I get the page that looks like so. Now the functionality of this, it's a search results page. How that's done, you can look at one of the previous YouTube videos that I've done building search results. So that's already done for you, but what's of particular interest here is the idea that we've got this function here called save string. Let's just quickly explain how the search is working. We are getting a value from a form. We are concatenating wildcards to that, and then we are running that through an SQL search using a prepare to bind that value in as our search term, and then executing the query. So you'll find more details on that in another movie. So what is this save string actually doing then? Well, what I want to be really sure of before I run this against the database is that what I'm going to run is a string. Now our prepare statement is going to do that for us in terms of escaping that with the quotes, but I thought it'd be useful to sanitize this as well before we went any further. So there are, in the PHP world, there are a range of what's known as filters that you can use to validate data, i.e. check it is of a certain type, or sanitize it to make it safe so that you can remove suspicious characters. Primarily you might want to remove HTML, which is what I'm going to do here. That'll be important for when we get into our content management system. So let's just have a look at these separately before we show you what's going on. So I've got a little file here called filter example, and let's say that I've got a test variable called test data and I set it to 1. And what I could do is, with that test data, is I could run it through the filter var method from PHP, and I could use this flag here to indicate that I want to make sure that this is an integer. Now, there's lots of different filter options on the PHP documentation, so if I go to validate filters, you'll see there's a whole range of different filters that you can use here, and I'm using the validate int, but there's validate email, which we'll get to, there's float, there's IP address, there's URL, there's all kinds of different validations in here. So all I'm using here is int. It's going to validate a value as an integer. So that's going to return true or false depending on whether it considers this to be an integer, and it's going to either echo is an integer or not an integer. So let's just have a look what that looks like on the server. So this is a file called filter example. I've not given you this as part of the files, but it's easy enough to create from that sample I've just shown you. So you see it's telling me that what I've got is an integer because it has a value of 1. Now what if that was a string of some kind? So I'll change it to hello, and then I'll go back and revisit that page. So this time I'm expected to pick up not an integer because it's false, and that's exactly what we get. So what I've got in my functions is I've got a little function here called saveInt, and that's going to return the response of this from a given value, so we can use this to detect whether we've got an integer or not. It's going to return false if it's not an integer, or it's going to return our integer if it is a valid integer. And the reason to save this in a little function with a name of saveInt, it just saves me from typing this every time. And if I choose to change this centrally, to change a value or add a new function, it's easily maintained centrally. So that one we're not using it in our index page, but we are going to use saveString. So let's get into that. So saveString is using filter var again, but this time it's using sanitizestring, and then it's got this third parameter here, filter flag strip low. So let's look at that in isolation. So here is exactly the same concept running with my test data, and I'll echo out the result of this. So what this is basically going to do, it's going to sanitize the string, and by default it's going to strip out HTML tags. So if I, for example, try to make hello bold there by putting HTML tags around it, you'll see that when I look at the file on the server, those bold tags are not going to appear. So it doesn't appear bold. I can prove that because if I inspect it, we look at the underlying HTML that's echoed out, then there's no tags around that. If I wasn't running it through this, if I just comment that out a second, this should now appear bold when I revisit the server, which it does. You see the strong tag there. So what this is doing for me, it's removing, it's stripping tags. And this flag is the lowest flag option I can use for filtering particular ASCII characters up to ASCII number 32. We don't need to go into that. The important thing is it's going to strip HTML tags. Now the main one I'm interested in as I get into CMS is I want to make sure that it's not going to allow any nasty JavaScript in so hackers use this technique known as XSS, which is cross site scripting, and they'll attempt to run JavaScript in your application. Now, if I leave that unfiltered, let's show you what will happen. So if I run that unfiltered, it is going to fire up this alert, which is a bit of JavaScript. Now, you don't want that to happen. You don't want, so imagine if it's coming from a user input, you don't want them being able to run JavaScript. So by scripting these tags, we can stop that from happening. So if I switch this on, so we're going to filter that first to strip the tags before we try to echo it back to the user. We are then going to find that it just appears like so. So the script tags have been stripped, they've been removed. So although they were in that value there, which potentially could have come from a user via get or post, we've removed them, so we've made our data nice and safe. Now, a little convention I'm also using in here is, you'll see that I've done that with the film name, but it's been run through save string, and I've created a new variable name, sFilm name, which is a little convention to indicate this is a safe film name, and that's what I'm then going to use in the rest of my SQL query. Just another little feature before we move on from here. The email one is useful. I could run some test data through filter validate email, and that would pick up as to whether I had a valid email address. So let's just put one in here. So I'll just make up an email address. So that looks like a valid email address. Let's publish it to the server. And what we should get is that, let's try again. We get a valid email. If that wasn't a valid email, so if I didn't have the @sign in, let's try that. We are going to get not an email. So that's really useful for validating user inputs to decide whether what you've got is an email address if somebody's trying to log into your system and you have a requirement for an email. So as we go through the other little examples in this sequence of videos, you'll see that I'm going to load in this functions because it's going to give me quick and easy access to the likes of these filter vars. And let's add one of these in ourselves. So in the PDF, it does suggest that you might want to add in one for a float. So let's do that. So we could have a function here. So we could say function safe float, and it's going to receive some float variable of some kind as its parameter. And then I'm using this flag here. That little pesky characters in the PDF because it's too long a line. I should finish the line like so. So now I've got an additional function called saveFloat that's going to filter, it's going to sanitize a float to make sure that it is a float, i.e. it's a decimal number. And if it is, it will return that decimal number. If it's not, it will return false. And we could keep building this file up with other kind of helper functions to help us with our validation and sanitization of the